Hey, LarkenRose here. Let's talk about Taylor Swift. Okay, the title of this video is only half clickbait, intentionally trying to agitate people. People who get all upset about, I'm trying to watch football and I have to watch like a pretty girl be happy for 10 seconds. Rough, stinking life you have. This isn't really about Taylor Swift, but she is an example of something that I did think was worth talking about. So I already see people saying that Taylor Swift's part of literally part of the secret satanic cabal. Her and Travis Kelce, yeah. And I even every once in a while watch football, just barely. It's so weird to me that people who are voluntarists and anarchists seem to forget what it's like to not be, even though the vast majority of them were statists before. And they do this weird thing that if somebody is famous, they decide that, like, normal cause and effect don't apply, or that they're not human beings or something. So when people jump to, like Taylor Swift is secretly a controlled opposition pushing the agenda of the globalists. Like, okay, that's one option. That's one possibility. Kind of, sort of, not really. But ready for a strikingly shocking other possibility? Maybe she's a person who grew up surrounded by statists, so she's a statist. Why does it have to be something beyond that whenever somebody famous has a statist opinion? Like, she does lots of work recording music. I don't think she focuses a huge ton on studying in depth, like, the history of political philosophy. And I guarantee she's mostly surrounded by liberals. So if you're surrounded by people saying Trump is a horrible racist and a fascist, and the world's going to come to an end if he wins, wouldn't surprise me that much if a person surrounded by such people says, oh, well, I guess it would be better for the other guy to win, right? The end. You don't have to, include them in some satanic conspiracy. You think they had a secret meeting with Taylor Swift behind closed doors and said, okay, we're hoping you're super evil because we're all super evil and we want you to help us be super duper evil. And not just her, but hundreds of celebrities who are mostly leftist collectivists. How about just they're people who have an audience and they believe statist garbage? Travis Kelce, pretty awesome football player. Is he a genius when it comes to statistical probabilities and data analysis of medical care? No, but if somebody goes to him and say, hey, we have this vaccine, it's really helping a bunch of people out, and we want you to help us promote it, here's a huge pile of money. What do you think he's going to say? He's going to say, okay, I'll go out there and say, people should get this. Yeah, I was told it's really good for people, so get this. And then they give me a pile of money. Which do you think would work better for the ruling class? That, or going to somebody and saying, hey, I see you're rich and famous at this other thing, playing sports. Well, we're evil. We want to lower the population and victimize people and empower evil psychopaths and enrich heartless, callous loonies in big pharma. So can we pay you some money to be part of our evil satanic cabal? That's not what's going on. Now, I'm not at all saying there aren't actually groups of people who are all the way just frickin' psychos. All the way psychopaths who don't care about anybody else and don't at all mind endangering and killing a bunch of innocent people to serve their power. Those people totally exist. But to assume that everybody else who supports their agenda in any way must be in on the secret plan is ridiculous. Take a fine example, which is Operation Northwoods. I've talked about it a million times before. It's where all of the Joint Chiefs of Staff under JFK signed off on a plan to fake, do false flag terrorism against Americans, including on U.S. soil, to blame it on Cuba to start a war with Cuba when Castro was there. And the plan didn't go through. All of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, all of them signed off on it. All of the top brass of all the different, branches of the military said, yeah, we like the idea of faking terrorism and sometimes doing actual terrorism, sometimes against Americans. We're all okay. All us higher ups, all the top brass at the Pentagon are okay with murdering Americans to scare them into supporting some more warmongering. That's real. And if you think that's a crazy conspiracy theory, go read the Operation Northwoods documents. They were declassified. You can see it in their own words. Yes, there are psychopaths. One of the interesting things in there is when they're discussing the various ways to fake people out, including switching out a commercial airline for a military plane that looks like it and painting it differently, and faking things like blowing up a U.S. ship. There were a bunch of listed different ideas they had for starting a completely unnecessary war. But one of the things they mention is how many people are going to know what's going on. And one of the things is if we blow up a U.S. aircraft and plunk it in the ocean somewhere, it actually serves us better. This isn't their exact words, but you can go read it. If the U.S. military people who find it and find the wreckage think it was real, so that they report it as real. And in the document, it even says, here's the levels that are allowed to know about it. And then all the levels below that, it's classified, they don't get to know. So all the pawns who are going to be sent off in this, war against Cuba, if they could have managed to start one, they wouldn't get to know. They would be fed the same BS that the rest of the world and the rest of the country is fed. These total blatant lies to do the false flag to get people riled up for a war. But the fact that the documents talk about, here's the only levels who are allowed to know about this. Everybody below that, no, we're going to lie to them too. Our own minions we're going to lie to. And anybody below this office, they're all going to, be victims of the lie too. Because the more people who actually know what's involved and what's going on, the harder it is to keep the lie. Well, that's the same thing now. When they're going to push an agenda, sometimes they can just do it with money. Here's a bunch of money, go out here and push this crap. And somebody's, whether it's a sports star or a governor of a state or some political parasite, here, we'll sort of fling you a few $1 million under the table. Now go out there and talk about how important it is to have, shut down businesses and have mask mandates and a bunch of things to scare people and remind them to be scared so we can make a bunch of money off of it. There's a whole spectrum of awareness that a person has to have to be involved in that. Some people can just be, oh, you gave me money to say good things about your pseudo vaccine, and you're telling me it's safe and effective, and you'll give me a pile of money if I go out and say it's safe and effective. So some of the people are oblivious. They're at least negligent because they didn't bother to check, because they didn't want to check because they were getting millions of dollars. Why the hell would they check? All the way up to people who actually know, people like Fauci, who's a lying piece of crap and knew he was lying the whole time about absolutely all of it. He is complete callous psycho. Amusingly, the inventor of the PCR test, Kerry Mullis, before he died, talked about Anthony Fauci and just said, yeah, he's not a scientist. He's a bought and paid for slime ball, who will say pretty much anything that they'll pay him to say. And Kerry Mullis said it in almost those words. You can go look it up. And same guy who said, don't use this test as a test to see if somebody has something, because the way we amplify these things. You can make anything show up as positive, but I'm not going to get into the details of that. But so you have the whole spectrum of how much the people involved know about. And often even the recipient will, like if it's some politician and they're like, okay, don't tell me more than like the part I need to know and tell me what to do, because I want plausible deniability, which means me, the politician, I want to be able to pretend that I didn't know anything about it when your evil crap comes to light. So don't tell me the evil crap. Like that's literally part of their operating procedure. The fact that plausible deniability is an actual thing is because they think this way. Where if somebody knows full well there's some seriously shady stuff behind this, don't even tell me that shady stuff. You just tell me what I need to know and give me my money or give me my power or whatever, and I'll do your bidding, and then I can pretend I had no idea when it comes out that you're a bunch of murderous psychopaths. So they do that even with politicians. And it's weird to me that there's so many supposedly pro-freedom people who are so ignorant about how these things work that they assume that anybody who's saying anything that supports any statist agenda is like secretly in on the conspiracy. No, they're not. That's most of the world. Like most of the world, like most of the U.S. is either Democrat or Republican. Now there's more and more like in between and independents. All of them are statist. All of them are arguing over something stupid, which is which corrupt, psychotic loony should sit on the throne and boss us around and take our money. Are they all in on the conspiracy? If so, who's the conspiracy against? That's the whole country. The whole country is in on this conspiracy to fool who? Like you already used up the whole country. And to just assume that if somebody is sort of famous or has an audience, whether it's, Taylor Swift because she does music, or Travis Kelce because he plays football, or anybody else, to assume that they're in on some like intentionally, openly evil conspiracy is really stupid. Why would the psychos at the top, who can all the way be sociopaths, why would they risk such a thing? It's like telling all their underlings, look at all the people who are proudly Democrat or proudly Republican who didn't get paid anything to be that. They just got lied to, along with everybody else. And they'll still go, rah, 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 our guy is better than your guy. And they didn't need to be like in on all the lies and the actual conspiracies. But I see a bunch of pro-freedom people do this. It's like their goal is to, whoever can be the most paranoid and come up with the most conspiracy theories wins or something. And there are lots of conspiracies that are real. But if you just believe anything that sounds like a conspiracy because then you're in the know and you're ahead of everybody else because you saw through it, you'll start to believe idiotic crap. Like thinking that everybody in Hollywood is like secretly in on it. Now there's a form of, it isn't even conspiring, but there's a form of manipulation and having leverage on each other that politicians totally do. And, people in entertainment can do. Like the whole Harvey Weinstein thing. How many of them knew that was going on? Probably a crap ton of them. Like if they were close enough to that evil, demented crap going on. They also know, well, if you want to keep having your hoity-toity rich Hollywood life, you're going to shut up about this. Now, that's a level that, would you call that a conspiracy? Well, no, because they're just threatened with bad things will happen to you if you try to expose this, which seems to have happened to a bunch of people. And if you have something to lose, like if you're like a hopeful actress who just got to Hollywood and you're being promised all this fame and fortune and, 5 seconds ago you were a waitress in Iowa or something, and they say, oh yeah, there's some shady stuff going on, but we don't talk about that. And if you want to keep your job, you don't talk about it or you'll be blacklisted through all of Hollywood and you'll never get a job anywhere. A whole lot of people, to varying degrees, sort of keep their mouths shut about slimy stuff they know about because they have something to lose. And that can happen in just like, there's a mom and pop store, and yeah, the people who work there know that Pop gets drunk all the time and occasionally hits Mom. But we don't say that because we'll get fired. Like sadly, that's a very human, very common thing that people, as soon as they have something to lose, then there's something that somebody else can hold over them. And the more they have to lose, the more other people can hold it over them. And so if you get somebody, high up in Hollywood, it may very well be that they know a whole lot of dirt and they know to keep their trap shut because they know that bad things are going to happen to them. Like whether it's all the way up to somebody's just going to knock you off, or just, you just might not get that next acting gig or whatever if you don't play nice with the power-happy pieces of shit like Weinstein, who pull the strings right now. And so even to be under the control of evil slime balls doesn't mean the person below is in on a conspiracy and trying to empower the slime ball. Sometimes they're just trying to keep out of trouble themselves. By the way, this is like the entire military and every police force ever. It's like, yeah, you know that your fellow officer did some nasty, corrupt shit, and you're going to keep your mouth shut, aren't you? Or either your fellow gang members will beat the crap out of you, or at least you'll get fired. And there's a zillion real-life stories about that. I mean, Serpico, the movie, was based on a real-life thing about was that NYPD or LAPD? I think that was New York. That's just a dynamic that happens when there's power like that. Sometimes even like voluntary hierarchy. Somebody can say, well, if you like your job, you're going to do these slimy things or keep your mouth shut about this. And that's the thing that happens. It doesn't mean everybody is even trying to conspire to be evil. Like take the example of police forces. The likelihood that any cop anywhere who's been there for more than 5 years, who hasn't seen his fellow officers do evil, illegal things, pretty frickin' slim at this point. Now, maybe if you're in a little town that has like 3 cops and they never do anything, there might be a chance. In most major police departments, all of them, every single fucking one, knows that their fellow officers are doing evil shit, and none of them do anything about it. Because they're fucking cowards. Now, there's a difference between being a fucking coward, which describes most cops, and being intentionally trying to conspire to commit evil. But the outcome is the same. Like the cop who's like trying to be a good guy and trying to do the right thing, but he's intimidated into, don't mention that they always plant evidence and they always lie under oath and they harass people for no good reason and they lie all over the place. And like, you just keep your mouth shut and keep your head down and do your job. That's not the same as intentionally conspiring to help those people. That's just sort of a spineless, cowardly version of self-preservation of like, well, I don't want to lose my job, so I'm not going to say anything about the abuse I constantly see from my fellow officers. And that's almost all of them. That's why I have zero respect for cops, including the ones who don't personally like sadistically abuse people. It's because you fucking know that other officers are doing it and you're not doing a goddamn thing about it, which means you're an enabler. And it didn't require you to like conspire to do evil, just required you to be a spineless coward. And so when anybody says, oh, it's just a few bad apples, okay, show me the good apples who are arresting the bad apples. Show me an example. Because I can show you a hell of a lot of examples of the bad apples doing their thing and some sort of passive, quiet, good apples standing in the background watching and doing nothing about it. But that level of control and influence doesn't require malice, only cowardice on the part of the lower downs. So below that is the level, when it comes to politics, of people who just think, well, I'm surrounded by people who tell me that the Democrats care more and the Republicans are racist or something. And they, people like Taylor Swift, I no doubt are surrounded by people who believe that. So if she endorses Biden, that doesn't, to me, tell me she's evil, she's trying to be evil. It tells me she doesn't know a goddamn thing about politics and reality. She's just fed crap to be really scared of the other side to the point that you're going to advocate authoritarian injustice coming from your side. But that's not what she thinks she's advocating. Her or a zillion other people who like vote liberal and think they're the good guys for doing it. Now, there are psychos inside the system who know full well, you know, Nancy Pelosi doesn't mean well. Hillary Clinton doesn't mean well. Joe Biden doesn't mean well. I'm not saying there aren't actual psychos conspiring, but I'm saying most of their control is by way of people who aren't in on it. They're not in on what's actually going on, and they don't need to be, and it would be a huge risk to have them in on it. So, you know, to just decide that, like, Travis Kelce has betrayed us and blah, 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 blah. Well, he's being an advocate and a spokesperson for something that's really, really bad. He doesn't know that. Now, if you can show some shred of evidence that he knows it and is covering up, okay. But if some football player gets paid to do a bunch, like, you see football players, this guy's advocating, you know, or doing advertisements for fast food over here, and this one's doing, like, some insurance company. Like, do you think they're, like, checking into the ethical practices of those companies, or they're just like, a paycheck to do a commercial for somebody? Okay, I'll do that. That's all it takes. And that's about a billionth of the risk that those in power would be taking compared to going to somebody like, you know, Taylor Swift or Travis Kelce and going, so we're super evil. We like to kill people and oppress people, and we're hoping you're going to help us out. They don't stinking know. Now, on the one hand, what you believe about Taylor Swift or Travis Kelce, like, who gives a shit? Here's why it matters. Because if every single person with an audience who believes statist crap, like the vast majority of the world does, and like you probably did before, I know I did, if every time they have an audience you decide they're part of a conspiracy, all you're doing is sort of pre-alienating everybody from you. And I see one person in particular, watch, he'll comment under this video too, who keeps saying, anybody in the media is controlled opposition, which is just fucking stupid. They just believe what most other people believe. But extra stupid is to say it about somebody like Russell Brand. Well, did you know that one of his girlfriends a while ago was the niece of some, how many levels removed from a Rothschilds? It's because he hung out in Hollywood. That's the crowd he was in. But if you don't know about Russell Brand, that's fine. Like, you can make wild guesses based on not knowing anything. But if you see what he said and what he's been through, to think that that's what controlled opposition looks like means you don't have the foggiest idea how the game works, and you're accidentally acting as controlled opposition by playing the stupid game that says, let's distrust and resent and hate anybody who isn't already 100% on our side and assume that they have malicious intentions. What a stupid approach. So anybody who believes what you probably used to believe and what I used to believe, don't even bother to talk to them because they're secretly in on the conspiracy, which apparently includes everybody in the world who's a statist. Conspiracy against who? But if you recognize these are just people, like Russell Brand, who's a comedian and an actor, and he even talks about how his life doing the Hollywood thing and screwing around all over the place and having access to drugs, and to him that just felt empty, and it was part of his sort of growth to realize this isn't even fun. It doesn't even make me happy and fulfilled. And he talks about his spiritual growth out of that and figuring out that different things matter more than that. And so, and that, that's a whole different topic. But if you listen to him and go, well, he still every once in a while says something that's sort of statist. Yeah, him and 99% of the population. If you decide, well, I'm going to distrust him and view him as the enemy because he fell for the lies of the enemy, and there's still a little bit of residue of that. By the way, he's about this close to being a voluntarist. Give me an hour in a room with him, and he'll walk out going, oh, yeah, duh. Because he's what I refer to as a default anarchist, which is he already understands all of it on a instinctive level. He just hasn't heard it described in such a way that he goes, oh, okay, yeah, this fits together and authority isn't part of the puzzle that's legitimate, ever. Like, organization and cooperation are fine. Authoritarianism isn't. Like, he's already like that close to figuring that out. But when people go, but how come he hasn't all the way said that yet? I don't know. How come the 99% of the population hasn't said that yet? Because they're indoctrinated. And if the fact that they're indoctrinated makes you decide that they're the enemy and you're not going to talk to them and you're going to distrust them and condemn them, well, gee whiz. First of all, you're not going to like win them over and get them to listen to you because you already declared them to be an enemy, but you're going to make them not listen to me, you dumbass. Because if you tell them you're evil and we hate you and distrust you, they get the impression that anarchists are all a bunch of paranoid psychos. And then they don't want to hear the message. And that's the one of many reasons I say statism absolutely will fall, but to a large degree, it will be in spite of the freedom movement and not because of it. Because a whole lot of people are actively alienating anybody who isn't already on board. Never mind the fact that most of us weren't on board for most of our lives. I wasn't for a whole lot of mine. I was a statist, like conservative-leaning version along the spectrum, but I was a statist. Should everybody have decided that I was secretly involved with the Illuminati because I still believed in government? Why would you believe that about anybody today unless they actually give you a reason to think that? Somebody believing statist stuff and advocating statist stuff and advocating like and endorsing statist candidates, which is redundant. You can't be a candidate if you're not statist. That doesn't mean they're evil. It means they believe what almost everybody else believes. And if you decide that they must intentionally be evil, all you're doing is cutting off the people who have the biggest opportunity to shortcut past like individual word of mouth and suddenly talk to a gigantic audience. And Russell Brand is a gigantic audience, and it's why the people in power are flipping out. And they went on their demonization campaign. That didn't work, didn't shut them up. And they're, call them alt-right, which is just freaking hysterical for this, like, live and let live hippie. Like, what? He's not alt-right. And so you have this weird spectacle where people like Russell Brand, who came from the left, Jimmy Dore, who came from the left and still kind of is left. He's very left-leaning. He just recognizes that the Democratic Party is just authoritarian psychos too. So you have a system that's alienating these people by going so ridiculously authoritarian that even a bunch of normal people, Tucker Carlson's one who came from the right and was like, this warmongering is getting a little out of hand, and then learning more. And now you have like Tucker Carlson talking to Russell Brand and stuff, and the establishment hating them both, and the misinformation, and they must be shut down and silenced. Meanwhile, you have a number of voluntarists and anarchists going, I don't trust them, they're evil, they're satanic, and they're blah, blah, blah. You idiots. There are allies waiting to happen. They saw through a bunch of the BS they always believed and they always took for granted, to the point they started saying stuff, and they got, like, Tucker Carlson got fired. That's not at all suspicious. The guy with the biggest cable show in the world suddenly gets fired. Gee, I wonder if it had anything to do with him not towing the line of Fox warmongering news. And so these people, like, they already have audiences in the millions, and they're this far away from understanding reality. And some of them have, they've had chats with, like Michael Malice, and they're starting to mention anarchism. Russell Brand has mentioned it on several occasions. I don't know that he fully understands what it means yet. But if the actual psychos can make you so paranoid and scared of everybody that you're going to put up a wall between you and anybody who believes what most of the world believes, which is, well, we have to have a government, and oh, I like this crook better than that crook. I don't trust them. They're the enemy. You're doing exactly what those in power want. You're self-censoring. You're hiding yourself in a little closet and making sure you don't reach out to these people. Now, What's the worst that can happen if somebody is actually controlled opposition and like, I'm going to pretend to be one of you, but secretly I'm not? Okay? If you reach out to them and say, here's why people own themselves. Here's why aggression isn't okay. Here's why a stateless society is the only moral option. What's the worst that's going to happen? Is they won't agree, because they already didn't agree. Like, oh, well, thank God we dodged that bullet of them not saying something. Duh, there's literally no risk involved. And if you're dumb enough to like sell your soul and say, I totally worship this person no matter what they say, and then they turn around and push some statist crap, which, by the way, that's what controlled opposition actually looks like, and that's exactly what Trump is, pretending to be anti-establishment and being 100% pro-authoritarian and pro-statist. Like, if you focus on the ideas, even that doesn't matter. If you approach somebody and say, well, do you actually believe in these things? And stick with philosophical consistency and see if you can get people to understand it. And if they don't, or they betray it, like Vivek Ramaswamy, probably saying that wrong, don't give a shit. He's one more political puppet. He's an authoritarian joke. And you can tell by the way he talks. And if you ask him, but if somebody reached out to him to try to explain voluntarism to him, like, I don't nearly trust him, I don't think he's genuine, he's a very good bullshitter. He's very good at the rhetoric and saying lots of true things and sounding like he's anti-establishment. Do I trust him? No. Do I think he's controlled opposition? He might be, but I wouldn't assume so. And it still does no harm for somebody to try to reach out to him and talk to him and see if he'll understand. Now, if he doesn't understand or condemns it or whatever, oh well, whatever, next. Move on to somebody else. So it's not that there isn't such a thing as controlled opposition. It's that if pro-freedom people assume that everybody who's a statist is controlled opposition, like especially if they have an audience, first of all, you're being delusional and you don't understand how the game works. Second of all, you're being completely counterproductive. And look at the number of people, like Michael Malice has been on Joe Rogan's show and on he's been on with Jimmy Dore. Like, the idea of a society without a ruling class is being discussed in public in front of millions of people. That is very new. You would not see that in the mainstream, not even that many years ago. And that's huge progress. And how many people are like, well, I don't trust Rogan because like, he's a statist. He doesn't know everything. He doesn't pretend to know everything. He gets a number of things wrong. So he has open, honest discussion with people, including people who don't even agree with him. And so to cut off an avenue of communication like that because you're deciding ahead of time that he wouldn't be open to the ideas, the only people that serves is the power-happy psychopaths who really are conspiring to dominate the world. And so and I know somebody who used to know Taylor Swift. If somebody knows somebody and talks to somebody and the conversation gets to somebody who has an audience and they have a discussion about it, if they have, fame from from doing music or from playing football, and they go out and say, I think this is dumb. Like the stupid stabbies. You had Aaron Rodgers. Oh, come on. Number 11. Wide receiver. Blonde guy. Come on. He was the only other guy in the NFL who dared to come out and say, your stabs are bullshit. Slight paraphrasing. Somebody in the comments will remember. They dared to come out and say, we don't trust this. Look how hard the establishment had to condemn them. And Aaron Rodgers coming out and going, yeah, I don't. I think he even got it and then had problems and then was like, I don't. Like, stop forcing this on people. Let people choose for themselves. And look how hard they had to bash him because he has an audience. If some random person out in the street goes like, yeah, I don't trust Big Pharma, okay, that's not that big a threat to them. If somebody like Aaron Rodgers goes out and goes, I don't trust you bastards, then they have a serious PR problem. And so they flip out and they condemned him and they all ganged up on him and bullied him and demonized him and did everything they could Well, guess what? He's still there. And they did that to, I don't follow tennis, but they did that to some tennis player. And he's like, yeah, I'm not playing in your stupid thing if I have to get jabbed for it. And then I think he won the like world's best tennis player in the universe. Whatever that was. Shows how much I follow tennis. But you can see how much they have to stomp down on anybody with an audience. Well, that should be a hint to us that if you know somebody who knows somebody with an audience and you get them to start doubting the things and them to start thinking about the inherent insanity and statism, we're like this close to those discussions happening all over the place. And they're already starting to happen. There are already discussions of voluntarism happening in the world in front of millions and millions of people, and there weren't before. And that is huge progress, and the people so eager to decide that anybody who, like, endorses Biden must secretly be a Satanist. No, they're just duped. They just don't know what's going on, along with 99% of the rest of the world. So, see, this video really was about Taylor Swift. Kinda, sort of, a little bit. But the fact that we now have the internet, first of all, and then these podcasts with huge audiences that are run by just people with opinions, yeah, it doesn't have to match my opinion or your opinion. If there are people with opinions who are willing to have interesting discussions with other people, that is what scares the shit out of the people in power. Is Joe Rogan just having some casual chat with somebody who's saying, yeah, government's never legitimate? And if Joe Rogan says, well, I think we need some, don't decide that, like, he's evil, Illuminati confirmed. He's just still a statist. But the fact that he is a way for that conversation to happen in front of millions and millions of people, and so is Russell Brand, and so is Jimmy Dore, and so is a million other people, not quite a million. Don't shoot yourself in the foot by deciding that everybody is a satanic Illuminati. They're just people. And when people get rich and famous, they're still just people. Now, are some of them all the way psychos? Yeah, there's some that their behavior demonstrates that, yeah, there's something not right with those people. But the vast majority of people who get fame and fortune to some degree, they're just people. They're mere mortals. They don't know everything. They believe a bunch of dumb shit because everybody believes a bunch of dumb shit. But to decide that we have to distrust them and hate them and never talk to them, you're just shooting yourself in the foot. And even worse is you're ruining it for all the people who would reach out to them. Because if they get the impression, and Russell Brand has even mentioned the people saying you're secretly a shill and part of the New World Order. And he's mentioned that a couple of times, sort of flippantly on his show. Do you think that's going to be making him more or less open to having somebody like me on the show to talk about it? Or Michael Malice, doesn't have to be me. Or a bunch of other people, because there's more and more voluntarists. So stop. The ultimate irony is when you do that, you really are being controlled opposition. Not on purpose, not because you're secretly part of a satanic cabal, but just because you're scared and you're paranoid from past experience because you know people in power are power-happy psychos who will do nasty things. But if you're alienating people who could very easily get these ideas in front of huge numbers of people, you're absolutely serving the agenda of the ruling class without even noticing. So, and yes, it has occurred to me that there could be people inside the movement who really are like bots or actual infiltrators in controlled opposition trying to make the rest of us paranoid so we don't reach out to the people with audiences who are like that close to realizing this whole thing is bullshit. And there's more and more of them every day. And the people in power know full well, if we reach out to them and we start to get their ear and they hear it by way of people they know and people they trust, those in power are in deep shit. And one of the ways we're doing that is trying to get some of the people with bigger audiences to check out the movie Jones Plantation. Because I think there's a whole lot of people that if they watched that, they'd say something about it. And then a lot more people would watch it. And it would start more of a discussion that humanity really needs to have. So don't hide in terror in a corner and not talk to anybody because you're so paranoid and decide everybody else is out to get you. No, a lot of them are just indoctrinated and clueless. That's most of the world. There are some, evil psychos, but talk as if most people mean well. And every once in a while, you might find that, oh, okay, that person didn't really mean well. They're a two-faced psycho. Move on. Most Democrats mean well. Most Republicans mean well. I would bet, not knowing her at all, that Taylor Swift means well. And she considers herself a good person. And she's trying to do what she thinks is right. Along with Travis Kelce and 80 bajillion other people who have an audience. Now is the time to find a way to get their attention, not to tell them that they're secretly evil and we're never going to talk to them. Good grief. So, yeehaw.